Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Institute for Australian and Chinese Arts and Culture at Western Sydney University. I'm Professor Jing Han, the director of this institute. Prior to this, I have worked at SBS for 23 years as a chief subtitler and head of SBS subtitling department. And prior to that, I had worked at New South Wales Attorney General's Department, Victims Compensation Tribunal for Violent Crimes as compensation manager. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the country of the Baramatical people of the Darug Nation and acknowledge their ancestors who have been traditional owners of their country for tens of thousands of years. And I also acknowledge and pay my respect to First Nations elders, past and present. Welcome to the opening and celebration of this empowering and stunningly beautiful exhibition, Portraits of Women by Amani Haydar. I acknowledge the incredible honor of having so many distinguished guests here, supporters today. And also, of course, our guest of honor, Professor Brian Stout, Noor Haydar, and Tula. All your attendance is a testimony to the recognition and impact of Amani's extraordinary efforts and achievements in a range of areas. For those who are attending the Institute's event for the first time, just briefly, the primary mission of the Institute is to cultivate and build up the interconnectedness of linguistically and culturally diverse communities so as to collectively achieve and reflect the genuine multiculturalism of Australian society through art and culture exchanges and programs. Having the gallery on our main campus enables us to produce and present art exhibitions that inform, enlighten, and inspire students, staff, and general public. So as you can see, the exhibition is very viewer-friendly and exceptionally accessible. And we are open Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. So you're all welcome to come to visit with your friends or colleagues. Possibly, like many people, I got to know Amani through connecting dots. The first dot was anonymous. Through some headline news in the media about a woman being killed by her husband in 2015, the very story that Amani wanted to reclaim in her 2018 Archibald Prize finalist self-portrait, insert headline here. The self-portrait was very striking and left an unforgettable dot in my head, but I wasn't able to connect the dots yet until I had a chance to read Amani's book, The Mother Wound, the best book ever. And for that chance, I must thank Dr. Michael Muhammad Ahmed, who helped me, he's here today, who helped me connect the key dots. He said he can't remember. I knew Michael way back after he published his first novel, The Tribe, and participated in the China-Australian Literary Forum, CAF. Early last year, I did an interview of Michael about his writing as a part of study resources for students of Australian studies in Australia and China. Michael invited me and my PhD student Gowa to visit the offices of a sweatshop where we met, Winnie and Shirley as well. And as many of you know, Sweatshop is a literacy movement based in Western Sydney with the mission of empowering culturally and linguistically diverse communities through reading, writing, and critical thinking. Sweatshop has so far launched many brilliant new writers, including Amani. And Michael gave me a copy of Amani's book. I read the book straight away. It's a kind of a book, once you started, you couldn't put down until you finished it. And I decided straight away to do another exhibition featuring Amani's artworks. Michael connected me up with Amani, and Amani said yes to my proposal, but told me to wait, as she had just had her baby Hetty. So I waited, of course, till we could squeeze, and luckily we did, squeeze this exhibition in Amani's increasingly busy schedule, increasingly busier by minute, literally. Then I met Amani in person and we discussed the plan. And after visiting her studio, we decided to focus the exhibition on portraits of women, which you will see today. It's just remarkable. Then I discovered another dot that connected Amani's story and her late mother, Salwa Haydar, with Western Sydney University. For this particular connection, today we are thrilled and honored to have Professor Brian Stout, Pro Vice Chancellor for Teaching and Learning at Western Sydney University, to open the exhibition. Professor Brian Stout is a professor of social work. He has a long history of research, teaching, and practice in Australia, Europe, and South Africa in criminal justice, youth justice, probation, and social work. His recent book, Community Justice in Australia, Knowledge, Skills, and Values, shows how the concept of community justice can be successfully applied within Australia by social workers, criminologists, parole officers, and anyone working in the community with both adults and young people. Professor Brian Stout taught at and was the Dean of School of Social Sciences at Western Sydney University. And he will share the story about Amani's mother, who was involved for her studies of social work in his school. Now, please welcome Professor Brian Stout, Pro Vice Chancellor of Western Sydney University, to give the opening speech.
Thank you, Jing. I'd also like to acknowledge that we are on Baramatical land, to pay my respects to elders past and present, and to give a particular welcome to any Indigenous people who are with us today. And thank you for those kind words, and welcome to the family and to all of you today for this very important event. The Institute for Australian and Chinese Arts and Culture proudly presents this uniquely empowering exhibition featuring Western Sydney-based artist Amani Haydar. Portraits of Women showcases the artist's vibrant and stunningly beautiful works that inspire strength, resilience, truthfulness, and beauty in dealing with trauma, confronting deep-rooted injustice and bias towards women going through grieving and healing. Her self-portrait, insert headline here, was a finalist in the 2018 Archibald Prize. It was created after Amani lost her mother, Salwa Haydar, in a brutal act of domestic violence perpetrated by her father. In the painting, the artist, in a brightly coloured and patterned hijab, is holding a framed press photograph of her mother, holding a picture of her own mother killed in the 2006 war in Lebanon, adding intricate layers of intergenerational trauma and loss. The exhibition consists of over 20 portraits of women, including Armani's self-portraits depicting her journey of recovery from the trauma, as well as a portrait of her younger sister, Nur Haydar, and other women, celebrating the strength and joy in life. Armani uses her art and writing to explore the personal, political, social, and cultural dimensions of trauma, gender violence, loss, and identity. Armani's artworks have a distinctive style, and her exquisite portraits of women featured prominently in this exhibition are a central part of her artistic practice, telling stories of women within a feminist, anti-oppressive ethos. Her use of vibrant colours evokes hope and courage. The eyes of the women in the portraits, in particular, touch a chord with the viewer. They convey intelligence, determination, sorrow, and spirit. The beautiful natural world is also reflected in these eyes. Acts of violence and trauma divide and isolate humanities, but art and artistic practice connect and strengthen us. We hope you will find the exhibition inspiring, liberating, and empowering. In 2017, Western Sydney University honoured Amani's mother, Salwa Haydar, who did not get to finish her undergraduate studies at the university with a posthumous bachelor's degree of community welfare. Amani and her younger sisters, Noor and Ola, proudly received the degree on behalf of their mother. I was very privileged to be on the stage as part of that ceremony and to speak very briefly to the family, both leading up to the ceremony and on the day itself. I was subsequently very moved to read Amani's account of the graduation in her incredible book. Amani discussed both the emotional challenge of these kinds of events, the meaning that she took from the ceremony itself, and the pride that she felt in her mother. I'm very pleased that this event tonight and the exhibition are further steps in the relationship developing between Western Sydney University and the Haydar family. Amani Haydar is an award-winning author, visual artist, advocate for women's health and safety, and a former lawyer based in Western Sydney on Darragh Land. In 2018, Amani's self-portrait, entitled, insert headline here, was a finalist in the Archibald Prize. As an active visual artist and former Archibald Prize finalist, Amani collaborates with organisations like Settlement Services International and the Older Women's Network to deliver visual arts and storytelling workshops for people from migrant communities. Her illustrations have been featured in publications such as Admissions Voices from Mental Health, The Very Best Donut by Randa Abdel Fattah, Safar by Sarah Malik, and The Racial Politics of Australian Multiculturalism by Gassim Hage. Amani's groundbreaking feminist memoir, The Mother Wound, published in 2021 by Pan Macmillan, explores the effects of domestic abuse and state-sanctioned violence on women and received several awards, including the 2022 Victoria Premier's Literary Award for Non-Fiction and the 2022 Matt Ritchell Award for New Writer of the Year, and was also longlisted for the Walkley Book Award in 2021. In the field of community justice, of criminal justice, of criminology and social work that I've worked in and I've taught in and researched in, there are first-person accounts. There are first-person accounts from victims, from family members, sometimes from perpetrators as well. They bring an incredible richness and depth to the field. And the Mother Wound itself, we talked briefly before about the different audiences that were there. That is fine. Standing here, I have to say, I really hope it has found a student audience. I really hope it is something that students here and elsewhere are reading and learning from and engaging with, because it brings a perspective, it brings a voice that isn't always seen and isn't always heard within that system and within those discussions and those debates, because it brings victims are often portrayed as being angry and vengeful, and Amani acknowledges that those feelings are there and are real and are legitimate, but it also brings an intelligence and a compassion to the discussions, as well as what we talked about earlier about a feminist and a victim-centered perspective. So it is a book that I commend to you to buy and to read and to engage with, and those of you involved in teaching to find a way to recommend to your students. The Mother Wound has recently been translated into Arabic, allowing Arabic readers worldwide to engage with the Arab Australian experience. Amani's writing has also been featured in collections such as Racism, Arab Australian Other, Sweatshop Women Volume 2, and Anthology After Australia. Amani was the recipient of the 2021 UTS Faculty of Law Alumni Award and was named Local Woman of the Year for Bankstown at the 2020 New South Wales Premier's Women of the Year Award in recognition of her advocacy against domestic violence. Drawing on her lived experience and legal background, Amani has served on the boards of Bankstown Women's Health Centre and the Australian Muslim Women's Centre for Human Rights. We're very proud to host and pleased to be able to host this exhibition today, and to be welcome to the family with us, and to welcome you all to this event. And thank you to Professor Han for all your work in organising the event. I think I'm handing to you.
Thank you so much, Brian, for this wonderful speech, and really touching and really inspiring, especially about the book. You know, Brian is a professor of social work, and whatever he says, it's a gold. And it is truly summed up what I've been thinking of this book. And I really love this book. It's so incredible, so truthful, and which I often admire before I actually met Amani. And how brave the person would be able to write this book. It's incredible. And then again, through Amani, I was able to connect another dot. Like many people, I watched Noor Haydar on ABC TV and read her reports, and I was deeply impressed. If you ever see her once, you would remember her by her eloquence, her elegance, and her great journalism. And that was before I knew, to my greatest delight, that she was Amani's younger sister. Yes, of course. Noor Haydar has been until recently with ABC for 7 years, and 5 of which she was ABC News federal political reporter in the Canberra Press Gallery. During her time at the ABC, Noor has also filled in as a Europe correspondent in London and as a host on ABC News Breakfast. She's now the host and a senior producer of Guardian Australian's flagship daily news podcast, Full Story. Noor has been a huge part of Amani's story and life journey. So we are beyond thrilled and grateful to have Noor to be the guest speaker at her Big Sisters exhibition opening. Nobody could beat that. Please welcome the fabulous Noor Haydar to give the keynote speech.
Thank you for that very generous introduction. I have prepared a speech. I don't think I've delivered a speech in a traditional sense in a very long time, although I am generally comfortable speaking in front of crowds. I think in this moment, I feel, the stakes are a bit higher tonight. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting, the Parramatta Gullah people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I feel very fortunate to have been asked to address this event this evening, and I promise to keep it short so you can hear from the artist herself. It was a privilege a few months ago to have been asked to sit for Amani for the first time. And it comes with a lot of pressure to address you tonight, not least because Amani is my sister, but because Amani's work is so raw, it's so honest, and it's so unbridled that I feel the pressure to meet that with my words tonight. However, over the last 11 months, words have often failed me as we've watched the deliberate destruction of Gaza. That is one reason why this collection of paintings is so powerful, because in the eyes of Amani's subjects, I see a familiar grief. I see a familiar sorrow. I see a familiar anxiety, not just because one of the paintings is of me, and not just because some of the paintings resemble my mother and my grandmother who were taken in acts of violence, but because Amani has been able to capture the entanglement of emotions that I, and I'm sure many of you, have experienced over the last few months, but may have been unable to articulate or prevented from doing so. You will see that some of the pieces hanging outside were painted years ago, and yet they feel more pertinent now than ever. The War Stories series was painted in 2014 during a previous round of Israeli attacks on Gaza. The image of a body wrapped in white cloth has become a picture that we have seen far too often on our mobile phone screens over the last 11 months. I think in the newer pieces that are exhibited outside, including some of the portraits of women standing in fields of olive groves and amongst rolling hills, I think they will resonate tonight with anyone here who misses a faraway homeland, or for anyone who flips through family albums, picture albums that document forgotten years and lost loved ones. For me, the whimsical colours, the floral patterns, and the stoic eyes that you, Professor, mentioned earlier this evening, they act as an antidote to some of the dire scenes that we have witnessed. As I went to and from work at Parliament House in Canberra in the early days of Israel's attacks on Gaza following October 7, I felt a disconnect to the world around me. I was disturbed by the apparent ambivalence of some of my peers, and indeed some of our political leaders, to the alleged crimes being committed against the Palestinian people in Gaza by a state that is considered to be a friend and ally of Australia's. During those months, I was forced to reflect deeply on journalism and the contribution that I wanted to make to that industry. When I was at university, I studied journalism and I submajored in film studies because I believed in the power of journalism and storytelling, in its power to bridge divides and in its power to expose injustice. However, I also knew that the media was flawed and that journalists are fallible. You need only look at the coverage of the US-led invasion of Iraq and the endorsement it received by some global media organisations and media commentators at the time. When I resigned from my job late last year, it was a decision that I contemplated for some time, and it brought me a lot of internal turmoil because, on a personal level, I was walking away from a particular career that I had built and that I had envisaged over many years. A number of things, though, factored into my considerations. I thought about the kind of stories that I wanted to tell, and I reflected on the role that I wanted to play in this seismic moment in our industry, but in our world. As an Australian with Arab heritage, as a journalist, and as a consumer of news, I was for many years cognizant of the inconsistencies in the way that both political leaders and the media spoke about Israel and Palestine. I was dismayed by the imbalance between the voices that were given prominence. I was dismayed by the passive language that was so often used to describe acts of violence against the Palestinian people. I was dismayed by the events in Israel and in the occupied Palestinian territories that received coverage and those that went hardly noticed. As many have pointed out, collectively, these practices can contribute to the dehumanisation of an entire people, and I did not want to feel complicit in that. I believe it is for all of those reasons important that we engage and consume stories that are told through different mediums because of the limitations of journalism. Art can often capture more authentic stories and help audiences see the complexity and the humanity of others. To end, I would like to ask you to consider one thing as you walk around and view the art outside. Amani uses some prompt cards in the classes that she holds with students to get them to think more critically and engage more deeply with the art that they're studying. And so I thought for an exercise this evening, you could do the same. And I picked out one of those prompts. And so I ask you to imagine that one of the artworks outside is a door to a new world. And imagine stepping inside of that image. What would that place look like? And what would that atmosphere feel like? Finally, I would like to encourage you all to read the artist's statement that is available in the brochure outside, and to have a look at those pieces which are available for purchase. I think in this moment, it is important that we all support local artists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noor. It's such a good speech. And when I was listening to you, I couldn't help remembering the line from Amani's book and saying that we came from the family of strong women. It is very strong women, so touching. And then the courage that you have, the clear-headedness you have, stepping away from your job, the dream job that everyone would want to have. But it's really clear to your mind why and how. So it's remarkable. Thank you so much. Now, the next section is about to have the conversation with Amani. And I just want to say at the beginning, because today's conversation, me with Amani, will be primarily focused on Amani's art and art practice, because we will have as a part of the exhibition, a separate event in partnership with a sweatshop called Portraits of Women as Creative Writers, featuring Amani Haydar, Shirley Le, and Winnie Dunn, the dynamite trio from Sweatshop that are to be reckoned with in Australian creative writing. And then that conversation will happen on Tuesday evening, 15th of October. And in that event, we will discuss more in detail Amani's award-winning book, The Mother Won't, and we will send you the detailed information about that event later on. So now please welcome Amani to the chair. My first question is quite simple and straightforward. What does this solo exhibition on Western Sydney University campus mean to you?
First of all, I want to acknowledge that this is an exhibition at university, Western Sydney University's Parramatta South campus, but that we are on stolen land and land that was never ceded. So we're on Aboriginal land, and I live, work, raise my children on Darug country, and I'm very mindful of that. And I'm mindful of that because my work is examining my relationship to my homeland as well, and the way that my family was displaced from that land violently. And I'm mindful of where I am at all times because of the conversations that we're compelled to have about violence against women. And in particular, I want to highlight the unacceptable and disproportionate rate of violence against Aboriginal women in this colony. The number of missing and murdered Aboriginal women whose stories we don't know and whose stories are not properly investigated. And just the colleagues and the beautiful allies that I've been able to connect with in this space and do this work and learn from, which has really opened my eyes to that injustice in a very profound way. So it's exciting to have work in this space because of the connections that I have with the university that Brian mentioned. I wish my mum could have been here to see it. I wish my mum could have been here to receive her award herself and to finish her degree, because I think she had such a valuable contribution to make to the community that she was a part of. She was very passionate about social work, and she taught me a lot of the principles that I ground myself in, and she taught them to me in a very sort of informal way, and probably not always with the correct terminology, but I understood from her and from the fact that she took me to visit some of the services that she worked at, and she took me to events that she was part of. I understood that there was something really important to be done in social justice spaces, and I understood that that work was difficult and often not as rewarding as it should be, but that it was valuable. So she's really my inspiration for that, and I think that connection where we intersect is probably here in this space and in this university, which is quite special on that sentimental level. I also feel really privileged to have my children here. I like young people being able to engage with the work, and I'm teaching at the university at the moment, which just happened sort of accidentally. And that's also a special connection because I really feel like I've enjoyed imparting some of what I know with the students and contributing something back to the environment that I'm part of. And there's a few of them said to me in class yesterday that they'd already seen the exhibition. So that was very exciting as well. And I didn't even tell them it was on because I was a bit like, oh, I don't want to be like that daggy tutor. I'm like too cool to talk about it. So, but yeah, that feedback was really exciting to receive.
It's really wonderful to see to hear you talk about the connection with the Western Sydney University. As you all know here, and Amani has multiple roles. Apart from being a practicing artist, you are also a writer, advocate, lecturer, as you mentioned, community activist and a mum of 3 children. And she's always been busy. The time that I worked with her, I now know absolutely whenever she's not replying, she's somewhere else doing something. She never, because she doesn't bother to reply. So I so respect that and admire and just say, oh gosh, she's busy with something again. Like this afternoon, early afternoon, I texted her and she said, I'm at my kids' school for Cultural Day. Yeah, it's almost 3 o'clock. You are supposed to be here for interview. It's incredible. And obviously your time and contributions are in high demand. Everyone wants a piece of you, but you have been keep pursuing your artistic creation. And you said making art is a language that comes more naturally to you than anything, more naturally than writing, even more naturally than mothering. So can you elaborate this and share with us what making art does to you?
Yeah, so I'm always asked, when did you become an artist or when did you start making art? I had a creative impulse that I couldn't ignore from childhood. I loved those craft boxes. That's what I asked for on my birthdays. I enjoyed any opportunity to engage with art at school. I enjoyed making things and making messes. And for me, art takes me back to that state of play that we all lose touch with at some point in our lives. And when I teach my workshops, I ask everyone right at the beginning to put their hand up if they consider themselves to be creative. And nobody does. They're like, oh no, I used to be when I was 12, but I'm not. And then by the end of the workshops, they're all saying that they've reconnected with that. So I think in a fast-paced society, and you mentioned that was busy, we need to make deliberate time for that state of play. And it doesn't always need to lead to a particular product, but it does allow us to connect with a part of ourselves that is really essential to who we are as human beings. And I feel my best when I'm making art. So I think to answer your question, the easiest way for me to express myself tends to be through an image, and that usually comes to me very spontaneously. And so the self-portrait that was in the Archibald Prize in 2018, I would describe that as my book coming out of me as a painting before I had the words for it. And that's what I've sort of described it as in the past, because of that impulse and that urgency that comes with it.
While you were answering the question, I keep thinking your mum would be so proud of you. And she used to call you the duck of the school, the ducks. So she would be so proud. And I'm going to talk about your finalist, Archibald finalist. In 2015, the loss of your mother to the horrendous act of domestic violence and the subsequent trial, an incredibly hard journey of recovery and healing changed your life forever. So in 2018, you decided to enter the Archibald Prize, which you had never done before. And you're just wanting to share parts of you and your sister's stories in relation to your mom that the media had made no room for. So one of the requirements to enter the Archibald Prize is that the sitter needs to be alive. So you found a way, you found a way around, and you are there holding your mom, so they can't see the sitter is not alive. And then to your shock and delight, your entry was selected as a finalist. And this painting, as we can see now, was hung in the Art Gallery of New South Wales and toured around New South Wales, viewed by millions of people. And many people have remembered the painting. So whenever I mention, oh, we're going to have an exhibition, I said, Amani Haydar, who is she? Oh, look at the picture. Oh, it's her. So everyone remember that painting. So tell us how this painting came into being.
The photo that's featured in this painting is printed straight off the internet, and when you look at it closely, you can see the Fairfax watermark on it. That photo encapsulates for me so many experiences and reflections, and so much trauma and grief sits within that frame. When I was 17 and my grandmother was killed in an Israeli airstrike in the south of Lebanon while fleeing her home after leaflets told them to evacuate, I found out about that through Al Jazeera News. So if you have a habit of depersonalizing the people that you see in the media and whose stories you're consuming, remember there are members of the audience who are their relatives and who are learning about their deaths live in that manner. My grandmother was the last person with her name from our particular town, so there was no mistaking it. My mum learned of her mother's death in that way, and I was about to sit my HSC exam in a few weeks when that happened. And I had spent some time with my grandmother, and she had a profound impact on me as a person. I felt very loved by her. I felt connected to her. I felt that I was able to tap into a certain kind of wisdom through her as well. And I found a sense of belonging in her household, on her land, on what is, now mine, like my inheritance was there. So the grief of losing her in such a violent way really changed me, and it changed how I thought about the world. And the media came along to our house, took that photo and interviewed my mum. And in some of the shots that didn't make it into the final story, they looked at photos I'd taken in the village when I was there. They spoke to me a little bit, but that wasn't part of the story. And that was a very interesting interaction to have as a young person, to be seen as the subject of a story. Then I sort of didn't really think about that photo very much once I was an adult and busy in the world. But in the days immediately after Mum's murder, someone at the ABC connected those dots and shared a story that featured that image and said, this woman has been in the news before, and here's the story. And so I didn't really, visualize the trauma in the way that picture then prompted. I was feeling it though, viscerally. So then I started thinking, and this image took view, I started thinking about the cycles of trauma, and I was pregnant at the time. So kind of holding that image there in front of my belly is significant in that way. And I just thought about, okay, well, what power do I have to stop whatever's going to happen to me and whatever's going to happen to my daughter? And how are these violences connected? How are they feeding into one another? And how do we overcome them? How do we find a way out of this? What is my personal responsibility in that? But also, how do I hold society accountable for that experience? So that's kind of how that image materialized. And I sat there and I thought about it, and the picture was in my head for a long time. But then when the Archibald Prize, I don't know what prompted me to decide to submit it to the Archibald Prize. When I think about it now, I'm like, that's such a funny thing to do. Like, you didn't go to art school. You just thought, well, hey, anyone can apply. There's no reason not to. You might feel a little bit embarrassed or whatever about it, but just try. And so I did. And there was so much interest in it. And then when it was hung, I saw how people connected with that image. And I just knew that I had to then unpack that story further and continue my art journey so that I can explore all the different things that relate to that picture.
My follow-on question is, obviously, because of the popularity of that painting, how did the popularity of that painting change your art or your life?
Before that painting was exhibited, I hadn't publicly spoken about my experiences. So without my control or agency. My family's stories had become public, but I'd never been able to comment on it myself. I'd never been given the opportunity to speak from my own perspective. I'd been given the opportunity to do like magazine interviews and a current affair and things like that, but I knew like instinctively that that wasn't where I wanted to tell my story, and that that wasn't an honest or authentic space for me. So when I submitted the painting, I thought a lot about, well, what happens next? What if it does get picked? And I thought, well, that's unlikely, but if it does, I'm going to have to continue this conversation. Am I ready for that? And the response that the painting received indicated to me that there was a safe space for these conversations to happen, and that there was interest, and that there was a way to do it that could be empowering for me. And yeah, I think that just opened the way for the story to sort of go in different directions. Yeah.
That's a great answer. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
I'm
very
nervous this
heightening.
evening. I'm not usually this nervous, but today was a full-on kids multicultural day, and then it's like a lot.
Yeah, and also, as we see the picture, exactly as you say, art speaks more than language. Yeah, it tells us a lot, just the painting itself. So that also leads to the next painting in 2019. You completed this painting, A Year of a Recovery. Very striking looking and a powerful painting. Yes, this one. And in the painting, you were holding your grandmother's silver needle and crocheting. You said, "We are knitting one layer onto another, stitching the wounds shut." The visual images stick in viewers' mind. You will never forget this painting. How did the creation of this artwork reflect your way of dealing with and recovering from the trauma in a way that words cannot?
A funny story first. This one was rejected from the Archibald. So I thought to myself, or someone said to me, an insider said to me, "Oh, you should just keep submitting each year. It's good practice. The judges will start to recognize your work, blah, blah, blah." I was like, okay, I'll try. So I painted another portrait, and I took it as an opportunity to reflect on where I was now, like document where I was at with my healing and recovery. And it was obviously my pot plant phase. So I was looking after plants. I was crocheting. I was in my house surrounded with my books. I've got a copy of Trauma and Recovery in the bottom, that side corner, there with my mug. And that book is like really well known because of the way that it explains the trauma that women experience as a result of domestic violence, but also the insights that it has into healing and what it takes to heal. And part of that is being able to reclaim your story, because that's how you reclaim your truth, which has often been denied, or you've been gaslit or whatever. So that's where I was at. I was learning about what my trauma meant, how it affected my mind. I was starting to feel more empowered and deliberate in my healing journey. And I hate the word healing journey. We don't have an alternative term for it, unfortunately. If someone's got one, let me know. But in the process of recovering and gaining back a sense of control and agency over my life, that's what I mean by that. And also learning how to manage the symptoms that come with living not just in the aftermath of a singular traumatic event, but in a continuum of trauma in a society that creates and generates a perpetual sense of threat, really, and violence against us. And once you've kind of had some of the lived experiences I've had, like I said earlier, you can't detach, you can't sort of depersonalize from those experiences when you encounter them elsewhere. So I was learning about that, but I was also learning about the importance of using our hands to ground ourselves in our reality, to observe our reality, and to get out of our heads and into our bodies. And that's what the crochet and the plants are for. I had about almost 30 houseplants at one point. It was a jungle. A few died and a few continue to live till today. Often thirsty, but holding on. Yeah.
Oh, it's a remarkable story. It's a remarkable story. We should, on the label, said 2019 Archibald reject. It's their loss, such a strong and powerful and meaningful story behind the painting. It's really, really good. I think they didn't get the story. So one of your latest works, which actually it was the first time shown in this exhibition, that's your sister Noor Haydar. It is a very bright and a very empowering and uplifting. What inspired you when you're painting these portraits? Was it easy or more difficult or tricky when you're painting your close family member, especially your sister?
I've been thinking a lot about how the genocide has shaped my relationships with people and the kinds of conversations my friends, colleagues, and family and I have had to have over the past 11 months that are different to the usual sorts of interactions we would be having and the fun that we could be having if this wasn't hanging over us on a daily basis. And in my mind, I think I'm really lucky, firstly, to be surrounded by activists and writers like Noor and Rhonda and Sarah, who was meant to be here, and Amanda. Like, you're all here. So many incredible women in the room that have inspired me in some way. I've been thinking about that, and I've been thinking about how do we document and capture the work that's happening in this moment? How do we preserve that? How do we make it into art so that it's there for future generations? Because there will come a time where what's being silenced now will be centered. That's inevitable. When injustice takes place, that time comes around. I saw that happen to my dad. I believe in that moment. Okay. I believe in that moment because I run into people now who are some ways related to my dad's family. I run into their children, okay, in my talks, and they're engaging with my work. So I know that that time happens. There's no escaping it. So I want to make art for now, for us to relate to express ourselves in, but I also want to make art for that moment and that inevitable triumph that I hope we get to witness in our lifetimes, because I think we deserve it, and I think our work is often ignored or downplayed, and there are so many stories similar to mine that won't see the light of day. Going back to just that first portrait, the 2018 one, something that I've been thinking about a lot is how my grandmother gave birth to my mum, but through telling my mum's story, I've also seen mum give birth to her mum's story, a story that is really has been pushed to the margins and hasn't received the sense of closure or justice or healing, if you can call it that I've been able to engage in relation to mum's death. And I think there's something really important to me about making those connections and drawing those dots and making them explicit. And sometimes I think about how much we should show and how much we should tell. And lately I feel like telling. So I felt like painting women who are just directly around me. And I thought I'd start with Noor and I'll work my way through this massive list I have in my head. Got one done in time for this show.
I love your responses, and surprising and also very enlightening that I couldn't help feeling, oh, I asked such a good question just because you answered them so well, really.
Of course, it's all about the question. It's the question.
I enjoy your responses. Did you have any pressure when you paint Noor? Would you think, oh, would she like it or not? Did that ever cross your mind, or you are very confident?
No, I said to her, you're going to enjoy the process. We're going to paint you, we're going to draw you. It doesn't mean that it's a photo. And if it turns out ugly, then that's okay.
Was it okay?
It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. And I think she felt more pressure than I did, probably. But we sat in my lounge room. I did that on my coffee table. Very spontaneous, very free. I didn't revise it. I used charcoal, which can be a little bit stubborn to erase from that particular type of paper. So I just thought, let's take a risk and let's just do something really intuitive and free and the same as how our conversations are.
Yeah, I think it's because your relationship is so solid, so being ugly doesn't undermine any part of it. So, and also, I love this series of you will see in the other room, 6 little, this is small portraits of a women, and they all look different, they with the different features and expressions. Were they portraits based on actual real women that you knew? And what does each represent? And how do you decide which to paint or not? The last question, do you plan to going on with this series? Because I hope you do. And I really want to do one day a exhibition of 100 portraits of women. Yeah.
Yeah, I've probably done 100. I used to sell them. So I would put them online, and because they were so quick and spontaneous and economical to produce, I would have a stack, and I eventually taught myself to be able to let go of them. I have a problem with being a bit attached to my work. And I sold them. So there are probably about 100 around Australia, some overseas by now. These are the works that I produce in between larger works. So this is how I keep my practice happening when I'm not working on a big project. And they're so much fun. Sometimes they're just the leftover paint and I splash it on in blobs and then I turn it into a face later when I have time. Sometimes I stitch back into them with wool or cotton or whatever kind of thread I can get my hands on. And they're fun. So I will keep doing them, and I've been doing them consistently throughout my practice. That's how it started. You have to be realistic when you're a mum and you're working at home and nobody's given you a studio or supplies. And that's my realistic way of remaining in touch with my creative practice. And they're not women that I know, but they're kind of women that I've encountered, that a memory of them has sort of stayed with me, or an expression, or a feeling or an attitude. So I like them to look directly at the audience and just confront them in that moment. Yeah.
It's amazing when you're passing by a woman. So something in my memory, I'm going home to paint it. So yeah, it's remarkable. And I'm sure you're going to tell me, wait, we can have 100 one day. We will. Yeah, it will be remarkable. And you have engaged ongoing activism, for women's safety and well-being through your art practice, running workshops of artistic creation for women of migrant backgrounds. Can you tell us how that idea came about and what effect that the workshop have?
Yeah, the idea came about because I was doing some workshops, and then I had a really good conversation with my colleague Yumi at the Older Women's Network, one of the coolest people that I've had the chance to work with. And she said, well, if I get some money, can we run some workshops for the women? And I said, sure, let's do it. And that sort of was how I kind of consolidated that work into a series of workshops. And then the women were able to exhibit the final product of that work after telling me in the first session that they weren't at all. They put on a wonderful exhibition at the Bankstown Arts Centre of individual works, as well as joint mural that they created, which depicted all of their migration journeys and personal symbolism from their lives. And we also invited them to bring in treasures from home, so things that they brought with them, and explain to us why that particular item was sentimental. And they brought the most incredible stuff. One woman brought in a copper relief that was passed on to her from her great-grandparents or grandparents, and it just depicted them farming the land. Another woman brought in a tapestry that she had hand-stitched when she was about 15 or 16. It was perfect. It was immaculate. So we displayed those as well. So that kind of came about in that setting. But I think what interests me about that work is just, it kind of goes back to the portraits of women thing that I was saying earlier. How do we document these stories, especially with the generation, my mum's generation? No one asked them what it was like, what they did, what happened, how did you get here? And they're getting older, and I wonder what's going to happen to all the knowledge that they had. And I lost the knowledge that my grandmother had. I didn't get to tap into that wisdom, and I didn't get to ask my mum all the questions I would have liked to ask her, because she was 45 when she was murdered. My grandmother was in her 60s when she was killed. So that's a lot of time to lose, and that's a lot of knowledge to use. And when I say knowledge, I don't just mean in the academic sense or in the sense that they had like a fancy formal education. I mean the knowledge that is transmitted orally and experientially and through skills and crafts. So I like to see women be able to reclaim that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so interesting to listen to your responses to this. Yeah. And also remarkable, imagine that all these women, all these people, they share something so personal and didn't realize there is a great value, because other people say, wow, you have this, and then you have this. It's just such a remarkable idea. I think that's really work well. Because in this book, I always wanted to ask this question. Now I finally have the chance. At the end of the book, you said there is an underlying question throughout all these works, artworks. Are some traumas too deep and too abstract to fully heal? Or is there hope that the cycle can be ended through self-awareness, creative practice, and activism? Now, 3 years on after you wrote the book, and you wrote those words and raised these questions, do you have answers now? And what are your thoughts on these questions?
My answer, I could talk for hours on this, but to sum it up, I've been very lucky to have really meaningful therapeutic experiences. I love therapy. I talk to my friends about it. I've done counselling through victim services. I've done counselling through the homicide victims support group. I went on a trauma retreat with an organisation called Hope and Heal. There's only so much you can do as an individual to heal yourself. And I mentioned earlier, when the society that you're in is chronically unwell, there's a limit to how well you're able to be. And you don't really want to walk around being that well when things are so bad. So I remember when I was at the trauma retreat that I just mentioned, we were sitting in a circle and we were sharing stories, and we did an art therapy session where we had to meditate. And then we had to illustrate some symbolism or whatever came up during the meditation. And what came up for me during that meditation was an anxiety about, okay, well, when do I stop doing all this therapy to myself? And when do things around me actually heal? Because I was thinking about oppression on a scale much larger than myself. And these are the sorts of conversations that my colleagues and my friends and I are having right now. We don't know how relevant it is to be able to cope in the context of genocide. We don't know how relevant it is to be able to cope if a woman is being murdered every other week. We don't have the power to solve those things as individuals or to heal our way out of them. So the solutions need to be structural, and that's why I included activism at that time, because I had an inkling that that would be the case. And I've now confirmed that you can't separate yourself from the world around you. You can't heal in isolation. And there's only so much you can do to just cope each day if you're being made to gaze into the abyss constantly. So that's where I'm at with that. I think I've done what I can to make myself a strong person, to be able to do the work that I do, to be able to connect with others. I continue to do that, but at some point, the world around me has to take responsibility for the things that have happened, not just to me, but to others in similar circumstances.
That truly explains why you move on to activism. It's actually intrinsically linked. And the other day I was talking to my colleague, Eileen, and she said she really likes your work and your activism because it's not just all about the personal healing. It's really about the human world and the society. That's all well connected. You answered the question, Eileen. She answered it well.
And that's supported by the literature on trauma. So Judith Herman in the book in Trauma and Recovery, which was written in the 70s, says that the women who experience the greatest sense of closure or healing do so because they're able or often able to participate in change, become agents of change. So it's kind of working on yourself, but then getting to a point where you're flipping into working in service of others. So it's not just me sort of saying that, it's really an important part of healing that we don't focus on enough.
Yeah. Oh, we can go on and keep listening to what you say. My last question, it's kind of a general question. What is your future plan for your artistic practice?
Yeah, so I said earlier that I'm going to paint portraits of as many women from the circles around me as I can. That's an intention that I have. I don't know how easy that'll be to actualize. I have 3 kids and one of them is with me pretty much full time. So sometimes I have to just be patient. But I know that, yeah, one way or another, I'll make that happen. So that's what I want to do next. But I've also been going through the old family albums and looking at pictures of my mum as a young woman and my grandmother on their land, because I feel a lot of a sense of anxiety in the context of the violence that's happening in Palestine. Our land was occupied at one point. There are threats that it'll be reoccupied, and those threats are real for us. And I felt that I wanted to go and see, well, how do I connect to that land? What does it mean to me? Why am I thinking about it so much, so nostalgically right now? I was born here, but I can't sort of explain that grief and that nostalgia that comes up. So I've been also converting some of those photographs into drawings / paintings on paper, just as a way of engaging with my mum and my grandmother in that moment, in that space, and reconnecting with these really beautiful, vibrant photographs. So I think I'll do more of that as well. Yeah.
I'm sure you have the same feeling as me when you're listening to Amani, because I'm a trained subtitler for many years. So one of the principles, you don't leave any, because the words are so important, so strict space and time. You only put the key words there. So when I'm listening to her and I would thinking, I love to subtitle this person because no words are meaningless or useless, so it's just every word that she said is so meaningful and so thoughtful and comes truly from her heart. And that's not surprising that why the book is so interesting, because whatever she's saying is so interesting. It's a very engaging, really, really good. Thank you so much. And the one and only Amani Haydar. Thank you. Okay, the last dot we will connect tonight is through our guest honor, Tula. Many people know about Tula through her tremendous and ongoing work advocating for social justice and diversity as a community worker, organizer, and a lawyer. Tula works in the Community Legal Center, providing free legal assistance to people who experience social and economic disadvantage, including victim survivors of domestic and family violence. She sits on the board of Edison Road Community Organization and is the chair of Asian Women at Work. In 2022, Tula won the 40 Under 40 Most Influential Asian Australian Award. So proud of you. And was the New South Wales Award recipient of the Australian Awards for Excellency in Women's Leadership in 2023. And I was so pleased to meet up with Tula. I heard a lot about her, but never had a chance. And I think it's through New South Wales Women's Reference Group that I met Tula, and I instantly said, can we connect it? And which we did. And then I knew one day I will have to invite her. So please welcome Tula to give the closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Jing, for that generous introduction. It was actually at a lunch with the Governor-General that we had met. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are privileged to be on Darug country tonight. This was and always will be Aboriginal land. As migrants and refugees to this country, we are all the inadvertent beneficiaries of colonisation. As a second-generation Vietnamese Australian, the daughter of Vietnamese refugees, I understand the struggles against injustice and the fight for freedom and fundamental human rights of First Nation people in Australia and all around the world, especially at this moment for those in Palestine. It's such an honour to be here tonight for the exhibition opening Portraits of Women by the amazing Amani Haydar, and to give some short closing remarks. I'd firstly like to thank the Institute for Australian and Chinese Arts and Culture, or Culture and Arts, at Western Sydney University, and its wonderful director, Professor Jing Han, and Professor Brian Stout, Pro Vice Chancellor of Western Sydney University, for hosting this powerful exhibition. Now, I've only met Amani officially for the first time here tonight, but I actually had the privilege of seeing her last year at the annual Domestic Family Violence Conference held in Southwest Sydney, where she performed the role of convener. And she did that with such incredible insight, wisdom, and compassion. And she was just as engaging, raw, and open as she was here tonight. I want to acknowledge Amani's extraordinary contribution to the community as a writer, an artist, an advocate, and tonight I learned a lecturer and an educator as well, turning her own personal trauma to a passionate commitment of raising awareness of gender-based violence and the effects of structural inequality of women. I also wanted to take this opportunity to share a little bit about my work. So as Jing had mentioned, I work in a community legal centre, and we run a legal service supporting people experiencing domestic and family violence. Unfortunately, many services like mine are inadequately funded to meet the need in the community. And the most challenging thing for us is to have to turn people away because we don't have the capacity to help everyone that comes to our centre. I also know of some retired women in my Vietnamese community who use their own resources to help women escape violent relationships at all hours of the day and the night, because they don't often access mainstream services for many reasons. Domestic and family violence can impact anyone at any time, and additional support is very much needed for women from minority backgrounds. So lastly, I just want to thank Amani for her tireless advocacy to change the way the justice system treats victims of domestic violence, for sharing her story of loss, grief, and healing, or insert a better word there once we find one, so that it may help other women improve their lives, and for sharing too with us her artistic gifts with this incredibly empowering exhibition that showcases the resilience, strength, hope, and life of women. So I hope you all encourage your friends and family and colleagues to come out and check out the exhibition, because it is incredible. And thank you all again for being here tonight and for having me.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that I found all the right people to speak tonight. It's just incredible. And coincidentally, today is also the day of a Chinese Moon Festival. So it is also called a Mid-Autumn Festival because in the Northern Hemisphere, it's autumn. And it's the time to celebrate the harvest of the year. It is held on the 15th day of the 8th month of the Chinese calendar. That is why tonight there will be a very bright full moon watch out for it. It is, and it is one of the most important festivals in Chinese culture. And the history of the festival celebration goes back 3,000 years. Similar festivals are also celebrated by other cultures in East and Southeast Asia. During the festival, you will see lanterns. Why lanterns are there? You're wondering. The lanterns are symbolizing beacons that light people's paths to prosperity, health, and good fortune. So they are carried and displayed, and also mooncakes, very rich, a rich pastry, not too rich, just right, are traditionally eaten during the festival. So tonight we have specifically included some mooncakes in our light refreshments for you to share and taste. And do remember we have a book signing and a book sale. Amani's amazing, fabulous husband, Muhammad, because I don't know Muhammad until I read the book, and I felt like he is the best husband in the world. So he is so thoughtful, so supportive. Oh, no more. No, okay. No more promotion of Muhammad. And so the book signing will be in the room and also sales, and then Muhammad will help selling the book. So, and also please enjoy the light refreshments and viewing the exhibition and mingling. Lastly, heartfelt thanks again to Professor Brian Stout and Noor Haydar. We wouldn't be able to have you without Amani. So, and Tula. So yes, we met at the Governor General's lunch. Yeah, so good. And all of you coming here. And so I really want to also thank my team, Sally Bowman, Yenny Liu, Lindsay Liu, and for the hard and meticulous work for the exhibition and for tonight's event, as well as our PhD volunteers. You see them around, and our interns, Siwan and Jingjing, for helping out. Enjoy the remainder of the evening and looking forward to seeing you on 15th October. Dynamite Trail. Don't forget. Happy Moon Festival and have a good evening. Thank you again.